Snow fell gently over the rooftops of St. Petersburg, covering the city in a white silence that seemed almost eternal. The Neva River glistened under the weak winter sun, and smoke curled slowly from chimneys along Nevsky Prospect. Inside a modest yet elegant apartment not far from the city center, Anastasia stood by the frosted window, her breath clouding the glass as she gazed out at the frozen streets below. Life with her husband, Dmitri, had always been steady, marked by warmth and quiet strength. Dmitri was respected by neighbors for his calm nature and his unwavering sense of duty. For Anastasia, he was a source of stability in a city that could be both beautiful and unforgiving. But that sense of peace had begun to tremble the day her younger sister, Irina, arrived at their doorstep. She carried herself with fragility, a hand always resting on her stomach, her voice soft as she explained her fiancé had abandoned her during pregnancy. Out of love and obligation, Anastasia had welcomed her in, insisting that family must stand together, no matter the circumstance. At first, it seemed manageable. Irina would rest in the spare room, wrapped in heavy blankets, sipping tea while snow painted the world outside. Anastasia tried to make her feel safe, while Dmitri kept a polite distance, his observant eyes betraying little. But soon, Dmitri noticed details Anastasia could not bring herself to see. Irina's whispered phone calls in the dead of night, her sudden silences whenever he entered the room, the way her eyes flickered with something unreadable, almost calculating, whenever she caught him watching her. One evening, as church bells tolled across the icy streets, Dmitri sat at the dinner table, his jaw tense, his gaze fixed on Irina. Anastasia tried to ease the tension with light conversation, but the air between them was heavy, almost suffocating. Later, when Irina had retreated to her room, Dmitri leaned close to his wife. His voice was low, filled with a gravity that froze her heart. "There is something wrong with your sister." The words lingered in the stillness of their home, as outside, snow continued to fall over the city of St. Petersburg. The days grew colder, yet the atmosphere inside the apartment was colder still. Anastasia tried to dismiss her husband's words, convincing herself that Dmitri was simply being overprotective. Irina was her sister, vulnerable and expecting a child. How could she possibly bring harm? But doubts crept in. One early morning, while the city still slept under its blanket of snow, Anastasia woke to the sound of murmured words. She followed the faint glow beneath Irina's door and pressed her ear against the wood. "Yes, it is safe here," Irina whispered. "But I cannot stay long. He suspects me." Anastasia's heart clenched. She staggered back, nearly losing her balance on the polished wooden floor. The voice that once belonged to her tender sister now sounded sharp, cunning, and secretive. When she confided in Dmitri later that day, his expression hardened. He did not raise his voice. His silence was enough to fill her with dread. That evening, as the golden lights of St. Petersburg flickered outside, Dmitri remained awake long into the night. And as the bells of Kazan Cathedral rang in the distance, he saw Irina step quietly onto the balcony, phone pressed tightly to her ear. Her breath clouded in the freezing air, her words carried away by the night wind. She never noticed Dmitri standing in the shadows, listening. Anastasia wrestled with herself. She wanted to believe Irina's tears, her fragile words, her stories of abandonment. But the unease had settled into her bones. Driven by desperation, she searched Irina's room one afternoon. Beneath neatly folded clothes, she found an envelope stuffed with thick bundles of rubles. Hidden at the bottom of her suitcase were documents marked with foreign seals, words she did not fully understand. The creak of the door froze her. Irina stood in the doorway, her eyes sharp as shards of ice. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was flat, dangerous. Anastasia forced a smile, her throat dry. "I came to call you for tea." Irina said nothing, but her gaze lingered long enough to send a chill racing through Anastasia's body. That evening, Irina was suddenly cheerful, laughing at small things, offering to help with dinner. But her laughter rang hollow, and Dmitri saw it for what it was, a mask, hastily repaired. Dmitri could no longer ignore what was happening. He began asking quiet questions among his trusted colleagues and acquaintances. It did not take long before whispers reached him, rumors of networks operating in the shadows of St. Petersburg, smuggling wealth through unsuspecting households. Some women had even been known to fake pregnancies, using their supposed vulnerability as a shield against suspicion. When Dmitri returned home that night, he found Anastasia staring out at the snowy street, her hands trembling. "She is my sister," she whispered, "but something about her frightens me." Dmitri's reply was steady, but it cut through her illusions. "Blood cannot protect us from betrayal. If she threatens our home, we must act." That same night, he overheard Irina once more. Her voice carried venom. "I cannot stay much longer.
He watches me.
We must act before it is too late." Dmitri's fists clenched. The storm was coming closer. The confrontation came sooner than anyone expected. One evening, Dmitri returned to find the apartment in disarray. Drawers had been pulled open, papers scattered across the floor. Anastasia stood pale and trembling, her eyes wide with fear. "She was searching," Anastasia whispered. "She said it was medicine, but I know she lied." Irina emerged from the hallway, her expression twisted with defiance. "You never trusted me. Either of you." Dmitri stepped forward, his voice low but commanding. "Tell us the truth."
Who are you working with?
Irina's lips curled into a bitter smile. "Do you really think you can stop me? You know nothing." For the first time, her mask had fallen away, revealing not a broken sister, but a dangerous stranger living under their roof. The moment unraveled in a blur. Irina lunged towards the kitchen counter, her hand closing around a knife left carelessly within reach. Anastasia screamed, frozen in terror. But before the blade could rise, Dmitri moved with instinct. He struck Irina hard in the stomach, forcing her to stumble back and drop the knife. The sound of metal hitting the wooden floor rang like a gunshot in the small apartment. Irina collapsed, clutching her belly, gasping. Anastasia stood paralyzed, torn between horror and disbelief. Her husband had struck her pregnant sister. The image seared into her mind, unbearable. But then Dmitri's voice cut through the chaos, steady and unyielding. "She is not pregnant, Anastasia." The world around her fell silent. With trembling hands, Anastasia helped Dmitri pull Irina upright. The padding beneath her loose winter dress shifted, straps revealed where there should have been the natural shape of life. The truth stared back at them both. Irina's stomach was nothing more than a disguise. Anastasia gasped, tears spilling as the last thread of trust snapped inside her. "Why?" she whispered, her voice breaking. Irina sneered, her eyes filled with cruel satisfaction. "Because you were easy to fool. Always the naive one." Dmitri's jaw tightened, but he did not raise his voice. "What were you planning?" Irina said nothing, but her silence was as damning as any confession. Dmitri wasted no time. He called upon an acquaintance connected with the authorities, a man whose discretion could be trusted. Within hours, men arrived quietly, their presence powerful yet unspoken. They searched Irina's belongings, uncovering coded documents, foreign currencies, and instructions linking her to an organized network smuggling illicit assets across Russia's borders. Her role had been simple: hide in plain sight under the cover of false pregnancy, exploiting her sister's kindness and using their home as protection. For Anastasia, the revelation was unbearable. The sister she had sheltered and defended had betrayed her in the cruelest way imaginable. Irina was taken away under the veil of night, escorted firmly, yet silently. The apartment was left in ruins of trust. Anastasia wandered through the rooms like a ghost, every shadow reminding her of betrayal. Dmitri remained steady, but she could see the weight in his eyes. The memory of the strike, the lies, the deception, all of it lingered like smoke that refused to clear. The silence between them grew heavy, yet beneath it, Anastasia felt an unspoken truth. The danger had passed. Their home was no longer a stage for deceit. But the wound would take far longer to heal. Weeks later, the snow began to melt, the first signs of spring touching the streets of St. Petersburg. Anastasia stood once more by the window, watching the river flow freely again beneath the thawing ice. Dmitri joined her, his presence a quiet anchor. He placed his hand gently over hers, their silence filled with unspoken understanding. The memory of Irina would remain, etched into their lives like scars into stone. But through the storm, they had discovered truths they could never ignore. Trust must be earned, love must be guarded, and even family could hide shadows darker than the Russian winter. As the morning sun broke through the clouds, their lives began again, fragile, scarred, but alive.